here we have Mr. Tucker, my supervisor for Whites Creek High School. He's our school social worker over here. I'd like to first acknowledge that while you have served as a school social worker for a few years now, I'm your first intern and thus your first supervisee. So based on this experience and your own experiences as a supervisee, what do you think is needed in order for this dyad to be successful, whether it's from the supervisee or the supervisor or both?
Yeah, so I would say three things, and I think, like you said, I think it's mutual. So first, I would like to say, like, roles and respect, I think, are important. And I noticed, like, before you even came in, and when I first started talking with you, like, I think in any type of relationship, it's important to establish that first. And we kicked off right away with that, you know. But also, I think relationships, just like with clients, you know, that takes time to build. And so I think not only amongst each other, you know, but relationships with teachers and the students and everything in the building is all important. And we know that as social workers that's the foundation for moving anything forward. So absolutely. I'll say that. And then finally, I think for myself, as a supervisor, like, this is my first time being a supervisor for a social work role, but I think it's important for us to be willing to learn as well. You know, I don't think that anybody, like, I'm constantly learning new things every day too. And I told you from the beginning, like, I'm excited to not only learn how to do this, but to learn what your skills are too, and take from you too. So I think it's mutual. I think, like I said, going back to the roles piece, I don't think that I looked at myself as being in a position where I was just, like, over top you. I think that it was a relationship type of,
like, mutuality.
Job. Yeah, mutuality. You know, like, I think to be able to be an intern in this position, you need to be able to do this position. So, like, and we'll talk about that in a bit more. I'm sure you probably have some questions in relation to that. But I think that you have to be willing to grow. Nobody knows it all, you know. And I think if you can accept that, then, you know, you'll be in the best position to grow as well. So I'll take it from there.
I think you and I think very similarly in that regards, that, like, though we're skilled at what we do, we know that there's always room to grow from others.
Absolutely.
Depending on the different positions.
Absolutely.
And even from our clients, our students.
Right.
You know, we learn from them all the time too.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
So it's kind of like humility.
Right. There you go.
Right.
Right. Hit
like,
it on the head.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And of course, like, when you're talking about those relationships too, not just with our clients, but everybody here, like, we are collective.
Right.
You were talking about, like, our relationships. So when we're talking about that collectivism, we're not only building relationships with our clients, but you need buy-in from the people that we work with
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. Buy-in
Awesome.
from the people we work with too. Yeah.
And so it sounds like when you said that in order for this dyad to be successful, there's the mutuality, there's the relationships. And what was the last point that you had made?
And the last one is the supervisor being willing to grow and learn as well.
Humility.
Yeah,
humility.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I agree with you that mutuality is goes both ways for all of those aspects. And I agree with you on that. You and I obviously have a good rapport and work cohesively together.
Absolutely. You're phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
you've even, like, jokingly, seriously expressed that you won't take on another intern because I've set the bar too high as a supervisee.
That's right. That's right. You hit it on the head. That's right.
So what concerns might you have if you ever had or ever have another intern, or if I hadn't performed well in this role? Yeah.
So like I mentioned beforehand, I think that you know, to be in this role, you kind of need to be able to do this role, and that's why I think that it's important for school social work interns that you have to have a master's in order to do this job, you know. So school social workers, as you know from being here, you know, we do a lot, and where our our job here in the building is primarily counseling, but you know, there's so much more that goes on with their role, whether it's home visits, bridging the gaps with the barriers that students may face with substance needs and different things. Like today we got a student who just had their home burned down, so we're going to be advocating for them in those ways. Whatever barriers that come up, you know, I mean, of course there may be days where it can be slow, but there's always something that we can be doing and have to do, you know. So for many social workers, I think they struggle, school social workers, they struggle with taking an intern because the work is endless, you know. And so for some people, excuse that, but for some people, it can be an issue with like taking on an additional task, you know.
And I commend you for doing that. Thank you for taking me on.
Well, I was blessed because it didn't feel like extra work for me at all. If anything, I lost work having you be here. So that's why I'm saying it'd be hard for me to have another one.
I mean, in our interview, you were like, I'm going to put you to work. I was like, all right, cool.
Put you to work right away.
Yeah.
And I meant that, and you exceeded my expectations, which is why I think it will be hard for me to have another one. But going back to that question, which is why I think that for me it would be one, professionalism and then competence. You know, I think at the very base level, someone coming in to be an intern needs to be comfortable enough to at least do basic level social work tasks.
Like they can't be novices.
Right, exactly. We especially in a high school where you have kids who are dealing with real life issues and barriers that can be detrimental to their lives. You know, we don't necessarily have the time to hold hands. We got to get to work.
Absolutely.
And so you know, with that being said, I don't expect anybody to know it all. Like I said, I don't always have the answers.
Same.
But with that being said, you need to have at least basic level generalist knowledge to be able to address some barriers and have professionalism enough to work with our stakeholders. You know, because there's multi-disciplines here at school, and you're not only just working with the students, but you're having to work with principals and teachers and community partners and members and
so many nuances.
So many different things. So many different things. So that would probably be my biggest issue is if I had to hold your hand and go through everything. Like I think that there's a time and place for questions, but there's also work that needs to be done. And if we can't address the students' needs, then like here, where I'm the only school social worker when you're not here, it's very easy for a student to slip through the cracks if we're not using our time wisely to address, you know, what they need. So I think like that's it.
Competence when you're talking about not only those hard skills of like understanding like our code of ethics and how we implement those to client relationships.
Absolutely.
But it's
100%.
those soft skills too.
Right.
So like it's not just knowing the content, it's knowing how to apply it.
They're 100%. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. You hit it on the head. Cool. As you always do. Absolutely.
Making me blush, Mr. Tucker. Making me blush.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. And like I said, I don't think that it's not saying that like I don't expect anybody to know all the answers, but we just have such limited time, you know, and there's so many things that we have to do and address.
Pulled in so many directions.
Right. So if you're having to constantly take a step back and maybe re-explain, or you have somebody who can't really contribute, then that's going to make it tough, not only for you, but then the students are going to struggle too because they need us.
They're going to suffer.
Yeah, exactly. And for many places, we're blessed to just have one social worker here in the building, and that's a lot. We need two. Every high school has two for that very reason, you know, and many of us cover multiple schools, so we don't have the time to play games. We got to get to work because there's work to be done.
And so even like when you're talking about those time management skills or the competencies, it kind of goes back to that time management. Like you need to know how to manage your time wisely so that you can provide the most effective services. Absolutely.
At a minimum, at least at a very basic level, you know, and that's one of the things that you do well. Like, and I'm not trying to make it about you, But like as you see, like if there's something that needs to be done, you manage the time well. I sent you something yesterday about students. I didn't even get an opportunity to look at it. You were already on top of it. Got to check the kids, figuring out if there has been any intervention, and if there's not, what we need to do. And you're on top of it. That's what we need here. We need stuff like that.
So they don't slip through the cracks.
So they do not slip, absolutely, because it's very easy to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
100%.
Thank you. So I appreciate that input. So you talked about those concerns regarding competence and professionalism.
Right.
So how might you have addressed those concerns had you been faced with that as a supervisor?
Ms. P, if I can be 100% honest with you.
Yes, please.
Like I said, this is my first experience with an intern, so I was blessed to have a really good experience with working with you. I think if I had to address it, I think it would probably start with doing like very minute tasks, like maybe more case management type stuff, maybe assigning some calls. Like I said, I think relationship is really big, and obviously we have a really good relationship. So I would take time to try to see if I can develop a relationship with that intern, and maybe see if there are certain skills that they can build on. But to be honest, like I said, kids can slip through the cracks, and if I'm a supervisor and having to work with you becomes a barrier to students getting their needs met, then we won't be able to do it. That's just way too much work that needs to be done, and all of us are here for the kids.
Yeah.
And so if we can't support the kids, then we can't work together.
So it sounds like one thing, if it was just like a neutral kind of position where like they weren't contributing but they weren't impeding, that's one thing.
Right.
But if they're impeding these client outcomes,
right.
Then you would have to kind of cut the cord.
Absolutely.
And say like
time is limited.
Yeah.
We're on a time clock now. Like I said, after we finish this meeting, we got to figure out what we're going to do for this baby who just had her house burned down. But we still have kids in the building who need their needs met as well. So we don't have time to waste. And things constantly come up. So you do have to be flexible and find a way to make needs met. But we can't hold hands here. We got to get work done.
For sure.
Right.
I totally agree with that. And it sounds like you would have allowed somebody to have time to gain growth,
right?
Like through that relationship building,
right?
And mentoring, providing that support, but
absolutely,
especially at the beginning. But as you evaluate their progress and there's not progress that's made, and it's again impeding the client outcomes, then you would ask them to take a step back.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I don't expect anybody to know everything, and relationship is big, and that takes time. But we're working with limited time too when we have these kids, and for some of them, the only time we're going to see them is when they're here at school. And obviously, we have an attendance issue, so there's a lot of kids who sometimes don't show up to school. So we got to find out where they are, and when they're here, if they're here, we need to meet them while they're here, and so we just gotta work with the time we have.
Be flexible.
And it's valuable, absolutely.
Yeah.
Be flexible, yeah.
Thank you for that, and like one of the things obviously that I admire about you and why I think that you're such an effective social worker is you have like such strong interpersonal skills.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's true. You are very skilled at like reading people and like what they need, meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
Which is totally necessary.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. So you've already kind of touched on this, but so I'm just going to ask anyway, just to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. So if there is conflict or too many incompatibilities, so not just that they're not performing, but if there's too many incompatibilities or there's conflict between the supervisor and supervisee, how do you think this affects the supervisee? And like does this affect their performance, and ultimately does it impact like the client relationships and outcomes?
Going back to it, I think it does affect the client outcomes and the student outcomes, because we just have limited time, and limited resources already as it is, and so time is a resource, and we just have to find the time to meet them, and caseloads are constantly growing, and for me, before you came here and helped clean up, we had like
We were drowning.
Yes, yeah.
in
I think
referrals.
yes, absolutely. I think we were somewhere near like maybe 60 referrals about almost, and kids just needing to have their needs met, and it's easy for somebody to just push a referral, and sometimes we like if you don't have a team or a process to go through and look up that stuff, like you might not know,
Yeah.
and so like it's good to have the support, but again, like if that time piece, if you can't get to those students, or if you're spending time trying to address little things and kind of coddle somebody through, then those kids are the ones who suffer from that.
Yeah.
But again, I think anything can be fixed, and if you're willing to work with it. And in worst case scenario, if it was to a point where kids were just really, really struggling, caseloads were continuing to grow, and it just like we couldn't meet or we couldn't work, then I would have to terminate. But I think that everybody has skills, and usually people are doing the best that they can, and so just like how we want to meet our clients where they are, I think I would have to do the same thing for an intern who was struggling or maybe needed a bit more support, and so I would work with them to see like what those skills are, and then try to find a way to make it work. And I don't think that I would ever get into a situation like that. But again, I was very fortunate to have somebody who was very driven, very definitely more than capable of doing this job, and
making me blush.
Yeah, no, but it's the truth, and
Thank you.
and you put in the work. Like I said, I don't expect everybody to know all the answers, but if a crisis, something comes up, if you care about what you're doing, you're going to take the steps and do what you need to do, whether that's doing some additional research or looking into or asking questions at an appropriate time, and just sometimes knowing to be quiet if there's nothing nothing that you can provide in that moment. Not that you've ever been in a situation like that, but I think sometimes that, like, for some people that's what they need.
There's strength in silence, though.
Absolutely. And you've just been phenomenal. Like I've been blessed, and I've heard horror stories from social workers who've had interns, and they said that it's been more work for them. And
it's exhausting.
Right, it is, especially when you're in a job that's high paced and different things come up. You have to be really effective with time management. And I'm the first to admit I'm not great with time management myself, but it's something that's required for this role, and you do a great job with that. And if I had someone who was in a position that was struggling, I think that I would take the time to try to figure out what those strengths are and put them in the best position to not only benefit me but benefit the students, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And if those needs can be met, then, and we've exhausted every option that we could do, then that we would have to terminate the relationship.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I answered that right.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, you did kind of already touched about that, like how it affects like client outcomes when you have somebody who's not who doesn't meet those criteria of competency and professionalism. So just a couple more questions. So can you explain your perspective on the parallel process, and how might your role as a supervisor translate into client outcomes? So
how does my role translate?
Yeah.
So
like with you being a supervisor and me being the supervisee, just as for instance.
So to be honest, like I think this is the best possible outcome that you can have. Like I don't feel like I have to spend a lot of time in a supervision role for you, because I've watched you do your job and I see how well you are and skilled you are in what you do in supporting the students. And not only that, but I get feedback from principals and staff and students themselves, just saying how comfortable they feel being able to work with you and talk with you, and me just being able to sit in and observe and watch what you do and see how well you perform. So for me, it's been kind of a benefit because I know that in a moment where I need to address certain things, I don't have to worry about what's going on with other students because I know that you're there taking care of them and they're having their needs met. And admin and everybody can count on the fact like that if I'm not doing it, they can come to you, and vice versa. You know, so it's more like having a coworker, and so if anything, it's affected the entire school environment because now they have two people who they know are able to support them. We have parents who call and request to speak to you and look out to you. Like when they ask for the school social worker, they're not always asking Mr. Tucker. They're looking for Miss P. You know, because they know that you're here and you're effective. So like I've been blessed in a sense, like I said, where my role isn't necessarily looking to supervise in a sense where I'm looking and trying to see how well you're performing because you've been in here, you've been doing the role, and you've been performing well. It's more so, like I said, that relationship piece where we're working almost in a sense as co-workers now.
It's like mutual support.
Mutual, right, mutual. And in the event, like if you have a question or if there is a concern, we can talk, which is why we have those briefings, you know, because now, in the sense that you're ending, it's not necessarily me supervising you to see what you can do better or improve. Is more of a mutual relationship where you are the school social worker and it's what are we doing today, what's happening, what needs to be done type of thing, and I can trust that you're going to get it done. You know, so I really guess I hope I answered that question, but in a sense, like I said, for me it's seeing the outcomes of students' needs be met and it happening and showing one that we will benefit from having two school social workers in the building because kids are getting their needs met. We're seeing positive outcomes, and I can sit back and just take a breath sometimes and be like,
which is necessary.
Right. Miss P is on it, and she's helping out. So, yeah, I hope I answered that. I tend to run on sometimes.
No, I appreciate it. They're okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, so say you had a team of school social workers who reported to you for whom you had to provide supervision. Would you fulfill this by having individual conferences, group supervision, or both, and why? Okay.
So I would say both. Again, and for multiple reasons. So
and there are pros and cons.
And absolutely. And I think kind of the pros and cons kind of are the reasons why I would say both. So I think in an intimate setting it's good because you have that space where you can work one-on-one and you can address things that maybe somebody wouldn't be willing to address in a group. Whereas in a group setting, I think that the group setting, nobody knows everything. I believe that completely. And so that gives you the opportunity to learn from your peers, and then as well as to maybe have some questions that may have come up later that can be addressed in that setting that you probably weren't in a space of thinking about in that moment, but now you know. So I think group work is always great work. I love groups. But then again, you have those issues for some people too, like when you talk about competence. Maybe someone is not willing to ask a certain question because they don't want to be looked at funny. I was blessed where like I said, I'm a big advocate for learning, and I don't believe in stupid questions. Like even today in my role now, I feel like if there's room to grow, like I need it. Like I want to grow. I want to be the best that I can be. So I've never felt intimidated by questions, but that's not everybody's experience,
sure.
And I think for those people who may feel uncomfortable, then they need that intimate one-on-one setting. And especially if there's something that somebody needs to work on, you don't want to address that in a group. You want to do that in a more private space. So I would say both.
I think that's great. And it sounds like almost to me what you were indicating was in the group setting, it's almost like lateral or vicarious learning, like
right?
By
Absolutely.
having like that support from your peers. Like you're not just hearing it from a supervisor, but you're hearing it from like other people with different experiences.
Right.
And having like diverse cases, you get to kind of learn vicariously through those. You're like, oh, this is what they did for this person. I can apply it when something similar arises.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. You always word everything.
Thank you. I'm also the supervision and social work course, so like I was like all fresh in my brain, all these different things. But I think that's great. Thank you so much for taking so much of our valuable time to do our interview together.
Oh man, if it wasn't for you, it probably wouldn't have happened, because I know you're gonna make it happen. The stuff we got to do today, you were already on top of it yesterday, so we're good.
Fair. Yeah.
We're good. We got some time today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Ms. P. And you do a great job, and you definitely set the bar high. So whoever it is, that if there is ever an opportunity for somebody else, they're gonna have to thank you for what they'll be doing and what I expect. But I appreciate you. You do phenomenal, and the kids in the building are all benefiting from it. So thank you.
And I'm very grateful to you for your supervision and your support.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.